Hey guys, tonight we slip into the shadows of a medieval monastery where the air smells of damp stone and beeswax, and the only sound is the faint shuffle of sandals on cold floors. Picture yourself wrapped in a rough woolen robe, the kind that itches just enough to keep you humble. You're standing in a courtyard, the night sky above you, a sprawl of stars, each one a tiny prick of light in the vast dark. No clocks, no ticking, no glowing phone screens, just you, the monks, and the challenge of tracking time in a world that doesn't care if you miss morning prayers. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this without oversleeping and earning a stern glare from the abbot. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in a Benedictine monastery, somewhere in Europe, maybe 12th century France or England. It's so dark, you can barely see your own hands, and the cold seeps through your robe like a rude guest. Monks didn't have clocks, but their lives revolved around precision prayers at exact hours day after day to honor God. The rule of Saint Benedict, written in the 6th century, demanded 7 daily prayer services called the Divine Office, plus a midnight vigil. Miss one, and you're not just late, you're disrespecting the divine order. So how do you, a sleepy monk, know when to drag yourself out of bed? The stars are your first guide. You squint upward, searching for constellations the older monks taught you. Orion's belt, maybe, or the Big Dipper, shifting across the sky as the night creeps on. Monks studied the heavens not for poetry, but for survival. If the stars say it's nearing midnight, you'd better hustle to the church for vigils. This wasn't just stargazing. It was a mainstream practice rooted in centuries of monastic tradition. The Psalms even mention the heavens declaring God's glory, so tracking stars felt holy. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some monks swore by the moon's phases, believing a full moon meant longer prayers because, well, it was brighter outside. No proof. It changed their schedule. But you can imagine Brother Anselm arguing it did, probably to skip kitchen duty. Historians still argue whether monks relied more on stars or local sunrise variations for timing prayers. Different monasteries, different skies, different rules. You shuffle toward the dormitory, your breath visible in the chilly air. The stars aren't perfect. Clouds can hide them, and winter nights mess with your sense of time. You're already wondering how anyone stays sane without a snooze button. The monastery feels like a living organism, its rhythms tied to the sky, the seasons, and the stubborn will of men who chose this life. You pass a flickering candle in a wall niche, its flame wobbling like it's mocking your tired eyes. Candles, as you'll learn, aren't just for light, they're part of the timekeeping game. The dormitory is a long, narrow room with straw mattresses that smell faintly of mildew. You lie down, but sleep feels like a luxury when vigils looms. The stars told you it's close, but you're no astronomer. You're just a monk trying to sync your soul to a schedule older than the stones around you. Tomorrow, you'll face the same challenge, but for now, you close your eyes, trusting the heavens won't betray you. Joke's on you, though. Cloudy nights are the worst, and you're not betting on clear skies. You're jolted awake in the pitch-black dormitory, the straw beneath you prickling through your robe like a passive-aggressive hedgehog. No rooster, no alarm, just the low, urgent whisper of a monk shaking you, his breath smelling faintly of last night's barley soup. It's time for vigils, the first prayer of the day, and you're already late. You stumble to your feet, the cold floor biting your toes, and shuffle toward the church. Outside, the stars glitter like they're judging your tardiness. Tonight, you're chanting under their watch, using the constellations to peg the hour. Because in this monastery, the sky is your only clock. The church is a cavern of shadows lit by a few trembling candles. You join the line of monks, their hooded figures swaying as they chant psalms in Latin. The air hums with their voices, deep and rhythmic like a heartbeat. Vigils held around midnight kicks off the divine office, and timing it right is crucial. You glance upward through a narrow window, spotting the Pleiades cluster. The monks taught you its position signals the hour for vigils in late autumn. This isn't guesswork. Medieval monks were hardcore about astronomy. Their libraries held texts like Ptolemy's Almagest, guiding them to track stars for prayer times. That's your mainstream fact. Monks were basically night sky nerds charting constellations to stay on schedule. But here's the quirky bit. Some monks believed certain stars carried divine messages. Brother Godfrey, the one with the wonky eyebrow, swears he saw a shooting star during vigils last week, a sign God approved their chant. You roll your eyes, but half the choir believes him. Superstition crept into even the strictest monasteries, blending faith with a touch of cosmic gossip. Historians still argue whether monks prioritized precise star positions or just winged it. Based on rough estimates, some say cloudy nights forced them to guess, throwing off the whole schedule. You chant your voice hoarse from sleep, the words blurring into a meditative drone. The stars outside shift slowly, and you wonder how the sacristan, the monk in charge of timing, knows when to end this. He's probably squinting at the sky right now, muttering about Ursa Major. You stifle a yawn, imagining a world with coffee, sadly, that's centuries away. The stone beneath your feet feels like ice, and your stomach growls, reminding you breakfast is a distant dream. Joke number 1. If you think chanting at midnight is rough, try doing it on an empty stomach and no Wi-Fi. The rhythm of vigils pulls you along each psalm, a step in the monastic dance. You notice the candles burning lower, their wax pooling like tiny defiant lakes. They're not just for mood lighting. Candles help track time, but that's a story for later. For now, you're tethered to the stars. The sacristan signals the end, and you shuffle back to bed, knowing you'll be up again for lauds before dawn. The stars don't care about your sleep schedule, and neither does the abbot. You pass a monk snoring in the cloister, and you're jealous sleeping through vigils is a sin, but it looks tempting. Back in the dormitory, you collapse onto your mattress, the straw crunching like a bad ASMR track. The stars outside keep moving indifferent to your aching knees. You wonder how the monks do this every night year after year. The answer lies in disciplined faith and a stubborn refusal to let the dark win. You pull your blanket tighter, the wool scratching your chin, and try to steal a few hours of sleep. The constellations will still be there waiting to drag you back to prayer. Joke number 2. Stars are the worst bosses, always watching, never giving you a day off. You're back in the monastery, the pre-dawn air sharp enough to slice through your robe like a passive-aggressive breeze. You're trudging toward the church for lauds, the prayer that greets the first hint of light, and your sandals slap the stone floor with a rhythm that says, "I'm awake, but I'm not happy about it." The stars are fading, but no mechanical clock ticks to tell you the hour. Instead, you're tuned to nature's whispers, birdsong, the blush of sunrise, the subtle cues monks leaned on to pace their day. You pause in the cloister, catching the faint chirp of a sparrow. It's not just noise. It's a signal the world's waking up, and you'd better keep up. Monks didn't just stare at stars. They listened to the earth. Dawn prayers hinged on sunrise, which shifted with the seasons earlier in summer, sluggishly late in winter. The Rule of Saint Benedict. That 6th century playbook tied lauds to the moment light, cracked the horizon. This wasn't hippie nonsense. It was practical. Monasteries were often rural, far from towns, so monks became experts at reading nature's clock. That's your mainstream fact sunrise and birdsong were as much a schedule as any Google Calendar, minus the annoying notifications. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some monks got weirdly specific about birds. A 13th century chronicle mentions a monk in Cluny who swore a particular thrush's song marked the exact moment for lauds. He'd stand by the window, waiting for that feathered alarm clock, and the other monks humored him mostly. You can picture Brother Thurston, all earnest, shushing everyone for his bird buddy. Historians still argue whether monks standardized these natural cues across monasteries or if each house had its own quirky system. Did a thrush in France sing at the same time as one in England? You reach the church, the air thick with the scent of old wood and incense. The horizon glows faintly, a pinkish smear that says lauds is right on time. You join the chant, your voice mingling with the others, though you're half distracted by a robin trilling outside. It's like nature's showing off, and you're stuck in here singing psalms. Joke number 1. You're chanting about God's glory, but that robin's stealing the spotlight with zero effort. The monks around you sway their hoods, casting shadows that dance in the candlelight. You notice the sacristan, the timekeeping monk, glancing toward the window. He's not just watching for light. He's listening for the dawn chorus that burst of birdsong when every feathered diva in the forest decides it's showtime. You wonder how he stays so calm, juggling stars, sunrise, and now birds. If you were in charge, you'd probably oversleep and blame a silent sparrow. The chant rolls on, and you try to focus, but your stomach's already plotting a coup for breakfast. Outside, the sky shifts from pink to gold, and you feel the monastery exhale like it's sinking with the day. The birds keep singing, oblivious to your sore knees, or the fact that you've got 6 more prayers to go. You remember the stars from vigils, how they bossed you around at midnight. Now, it's the sun and a choir of feathered punks running the show. Joke number 2. If monks had Yelp, they'd give birds 5 stars for reliability, but dock a point for attitude. You shuffle out after lauds, the morning air, now softer, carrying the scent of dew-soaked grass. The monastery's waking up cows low in the distance. A cart creaks somewhere. Nature's clock keeps ticking, and you're just along for the ride. You pass a monk feeding chickens, and you're jealous of their simple life, eat, cluck, sleep, repeat. For you, it's back to the dormitory to steal a nap before prime the next prayer. The sun's climbing, the birds are still at it, and you're already dreading the moment they go quiet. Without them, you're just guessing, and the abbot's not a fan of guesswork. You're trudging through the monastery's cloister, the morning sun, now high enough to to warm the stones under your sandals, though your robe still clings to you like a damp apology. The birds are quieter now, their dawn concert over, and you're headed to prime, the first of the daytime prayers. Your life here revolves around the divine office, a relentless cycle of 7 daily services, plus that midnight vigil slog you're still grumpy about. No clocks to nudge you, just the monastery's rhythm. A sacred timetable that's been drilled into you like a medieval earworm. You're starting to feel like a human metronome ticking to God's beat. The divine office, or opus Dei, God's work, is the backbone of monastic life. Laid out in the 6th century by Saint Benedict, it demands prayers at specific hours, lauds at dawn prime around 6 a.m., terce at 9 sext at noon, none at 3, vespers at dusk, and compline before bed, with vigils haunting the midnight hour. Each service is a mix of psalms, hymns, and readings designed to sanctify every chunk of the day. This isn't optional. It's the monastery's pulse. That's your mainstream fact. The divine office was a universal schedule, followed from Italy to Ireland, keeping monks in sync with heaven's clock. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some monasteries tweaked the timing based on their abbot's whims. A 12th century record from a German abbey hints that one abbot, fond of long naps, pushed sext later to better honor the sun's peak. The monks grumbled, but complied, probably muttering psalms under their breath. You can imagine Brother Alfric side-eyeing the abbot, wishing he could nap through none too. Historians still argue whether these tweaks were pious adjustments or just power trips. Did abbots bend the rule for devotion or convenience? You step into the church, the air cool and heavy with the ghost of incense. The monks are already chanting their voices, a low hum that vibrates in your chest. Prime's shorter than lauds, thank goodness, but your knees still ache from kneeling. You glance at the sacristan, the timekeeping monk, who's got that look, like he's mentally juggling sunrise and star positions to keep this circus on track. You wonder if he ever sleeps, or if he's secretly a saint. Joke number 1. If the sacristan misses a prayer, does God send him a passive-aggressive lightning bolt? The psalms roll on, and you try to focus, but your mind wanders to the kitchen. Breakfast is just bread, and maybe some cheese, if you're lucky, but it's calling your name. You catch a whiff of baking from the refectory, and it's torture. The divine office doesn't care about your stomach, though. It's a machine grinding through the hours, and you're just a cog. You remember the thrush from Lauds, that feathered alarm clock. Its song helped peg dawn, but now with the sun climbing, you're relying on the sacristan's gut, and maybe a sundial if the clouds aren't being jerks. The chant ends, and you shuffle out the monastery, buzzing with quiet purpose. Monks head to the scriptorium, the fields, or the kitchen, all slotted into the divine office's framework. You pass a novice tripping over his robe, and you smirk, "Been there, kid." Joke number 2. The divine office is like a medieval workout plan. Lots of kneeling zero gains, and you're still hungry. You're starting to get why monks leaned on nature's cues. Without them, this schedule would collapse like a bad souffle. You head toward the cloister, the sun now casting sharp shadows. The divine office feels eternal, but keeping it without clocks is like herding cats in the dark. You're already dreading terce, just a couple of hours away. The sacristan's probably squinting at the sky right now, double-checking his mental math. You wish you could slip him a Red Bull, but for now, you just keep moving one prayer at a time, caught in the monastery's sacred, stubborn rhythm. You're in the scriptorium now, the monastery's quiet heart, where the air smells of ink and old parchment. And the only sound is the scratch of quills and the occasional cough from a monk with a cold. It's mid-morning between terce and sext, and you're hunched over a desk copying a psalter by candlelight because the windows are too stingy with the sun. Your fingers are smudged with ink and your back's complaining, but you're not here to whine. You're watching a candle, its wax dripping slowly, marking time in a way that feels both genius and slightly unhinged. Monks used these burning wicks to track hours, and you're about to learn how. Candle clocks were a real thing in medieval monasteries, especially when clouds hid the stars or sundials were useless indoors. By the 10th century, monks figured out that a candle of uniform thickness burned at a predictable rate. They'd mark the wax with lines, say 1 inch per hour, and watch it shrink to time prayers or tasks. This wasn't just for show. It was a lifeline in places where winter days were short and stormy. That's your mainstream fact. Candle clocks were a practical tool used across Europe from Benedictine abbeys to royal courts to keep the divine office on track. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some monks got weirdly obsessive about their candles. A 12th century chronicle from a French monastery describes a monk who carved tiny saints into the wax, claiming it made the candle burn holier. The abbot wasn't amused, but the novices loved it, sneaking extra wax to try their own designs. You can picture Brother Edric all serious whittling a mini St. Peter, while the candle's supposed to be timing sext. Historians still argue whether candle clocks were precise or just a rough guide. Did monks calibrate them daily, or did a gusty scriptorium throw everything off? You stare at the candle on your desk, its flame flickering like it's mocking your sloppy handwriting. Each mark on the wax is a countdown to the next prayer, and you're starting to feel like you're in a slow-motion race. The sacristan checks these candles like a hawk adjusting them if the wick's too greedy. You wonder how he doesn't lose his mind between stars birds and now wax timekeeping feels like a full-time job. Joke number 1. If you burn the candle at both ends, do you time travel or just get yelled at by the abbot? The scriptorium hums with focus, each monk lost in his work. You glance at the candle again, its wax pooling like a tiny defiant rebellion. It's burned past the second mark, meaning sext is creeping closer. You're hungry, and the thought of bread in the refectory is a siren song. You remember the thrush from lauds, the stars from vigils, now this candle. Monks were timekeeping MacGyvers, cobbling together systems from whatever the world gave them. You smirk, imagining pitching candle clocks to a modern boss. Joke number 2. Sorry, my PowerPoint's late, my candle ran out of hours. The flame wobbles as a draft sneaks in, and you curse under your breath. A bad candle could mess up the whole schedule, and the sacristan's not above glaring at you for a wonky wick. You adjust the quill in your hand, trying to focus on the psalter, but the candle's got your attention. It's not just light. It's a tether to the divine office, to the rhythm that keeps this place alive. You finish a line, your letters wobbly, and glance outside. The sun's climbing, but here in the scriptorium's gloom, the candle is king. You're starting to respect its quiet power, even if it's a pain to keep lit. You're crouched in a dim corner of the monastery's workshop, the air thick with the damp scent of wood and earth. Your robe snagging on a splintered bench. It's early afternoon, just past sext, and you're staring at a contraption that looks like it was dreamed up by a monk with too much time and not enough sleep. A water clock or clepsydra, its steady drip marking the hours. The device is a clay basin with a tiny hole, water trickling out, drop by drop, into a marked container below. Monks use these to track time when candles flickered out or stars played hide and seek. But you're already noticing a problem. It's leaking, and not in the helpful way. Water clocks weren't new. They'd been around since ancient Egypt. But by the 11th century, European monks adopted them to keep the divine office on schedule, especially in cloudy or indoor settings. The idea was simple water flows at a steady rate, and you measure time by how much collects or escapes. Some monasteries even had fancy ones with floating markers to show the hour. That's your mainstream fact. Water clocks were a clever, if finicky tool for monks bridging the gap between nature's cues and human precision. But here's the quirky tidbit. These clocks were a maintenance nightmare. A 13th century account from an English abbey grips about a novice who forgot to plug the hole overnight, flooding the workshop and earning a week of scrubbing floors. You can imagine Brother Wulfric red-faced mopping up while the sacristan lectures him on stewardship. Historians still argue whether water clocks were reliable or just a backup. Did monks trust them for daily prayers, or were they more of a last resort when candles and sundials failed? You prod the basin and a drop splashes your sandal. The water's supposed to drain evenly, but this one's got a crack, and the marks on the collecting bowl are smudged. You're starting to see why the sacristan looks like he's aged a decade this year. Keeping the divine office on track with this thing feels like herding frogs. You glance at the monk tending it, his brow furrowed as he adjusts the flow. He mutters something about uneven drips, and you bite back a smirk. Joke number 1: water clocks, because nothing says holy precision like a puddle and a prayer. The workshop hums with activity, monks repairing tools, a novice sanding a chair. But the water clock's drip is the loudest sound, each plink, a reminder of terse none and vespers still to come. You remember the candle in the scriptorium, its wax a slow but steady guide. This clock's trickier, its rhythm dictated by water pressure and the occasional stray leaf clogging the hole. You wonder how monks didn't lose their minds, sinking their lives to something so temperamental. The answer, as always, is faith, and maybe a touch of stubbornness. You step back, your robe now damp from a rogue splash, and the monk glares like you personally insulted his clock. You mumble an apology and retreat, catching the faint toll of a bell outside. That's another timekeeper you'll meet soon. But for now, the water clock's got your attention. It's a marvel, sure, but also a headache. Joke number 2. If you think your smartwatch is glitchy, try timing Compline with a leaky bucket. The monastery's rhythm pulls you forward, the drip, 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 echoing in your head as you head toward the cloister. The water clock's flaws make you appreciate the stars and birds, even the cranky thrush from Lauds. You're starting to get it. Monks didn't just track time, they wrestled it into submission. One drip, one wick, one chirp at a time. You pass a monk hauling a bucket probably to refill the cursed clock, and you give him a sympathetic nod. Time's a tyrant, and in this place you're all its loyal, slightly soggy servants. You're standing in the monastery's cloister, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the stone walkway, your robe heavy with the day's dust and a faint whiff of the kitchen's barley stew. The air feels still, almost expectant, as you pause by a sundial carved into a pillar, its bronze gnomon glinting like it's daring you to trust it. Monks relied on these ancient devices to track daytime hours, especially for prayers like none, which is creeping closer. You squint at the dial, the shadow creeping along its Roman numerals, but a passing cloud dims the sun, and suddenly you're as clueless as a novice on his first day. Sundials were a cornerstone of monastic timekeeping, used since Roman times, but perfected in medieval Europe. By the 9th century, monasteries across England, France, and Germany had them often etched into church walls or set in gardens. The gnomon's shadow moved across marked hours, tying prayers to the sun's arc. Prime at dawn, sext at midday, none in the afternoon. This was no-frills tech rooted in geometry and sunlight, and it worked. When the weather cooperated. That's your mainstream fact. Sundials were the monastery's daytime clock, syncing the divine office to the sun's predictable climb. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some monks treated sundials like art projects. A 12th century record from Italy describes a monk who painted his dial with garish colors, reds, blues, even a cheeky green, claiming it glorified God's light. The abbot let it slide, but visitors thought it looked like a peacock had a tantrum. You can picture Brother Leo, paint-splattered, defending his masterpiece, while the sacristan sighs. Historians still argue whether sundials were precise enough for the divine office, or if monks fudged the timing on cloudy days. Did they guess, or did they lean on candles and water clocks? You trace the sundial's edge, its stone warm under your fingers. The shadows stuck thanks to that cloud, and you're starting to see why monks grumbled about unreliable heavens. You glance at the sacristan hovering nearby, his eyes flicking between the dial and the sky like he's negotiating with God. You're half tempted to suggest flipping a coin for none's start time, but his glare says he's not in the mood. Joke number 1, sundial's great until the sun ghosts you like a bad date. The cloister's quiet save for a novice sweeping leaves his broom, scratching like a metronome. You remember the water clock's drip, the candle's slow burn, each a backup when the sun played hard to get. Sundials were simpler, sure, but they demanded clear skies and a monk patient enough to check them. You're not that monk. You're already dreaming of the refectory's bread. The shadow twitches as the cloud passes, and the sacristan nods like he's won a staring contest with the weather. You step away, your sandals scuffing the stone, and catch a glimpse of the church's rose window, its glass glowing faintly. The sundial's back in business. But you're skeptical. It's only as good as the sun, and the sun's got a reputation for slacking. Joke number 2. If monks had HR, they'd file a complaint against clouds for disrupting workflow. You're starting to respect the sacristan's hustle-juggling sundial stars and that leaky water clock. None's almost here, and you're bracing for more kneeling, more psalms, more of the monastery's relentless rhythm. The sundial's shadow creeps forward, a silent reminder that time doesn't wait, not even for a monk with sore knees. You pass a monk polishing a brass tool, maybe for the next sundial, and you wonder if he's as fed up with the weather as you are. The divine office looms, and the sundial's your guide for now. You're learning that time in this place isn't just kept, it's chased, cajoled, and occasionally cursed one shadow at a time. You're shuffling through the monastery's courtyard, the late afternoon sun dipping low, painting the stone walls with a golden haze that smells faintly of dust and drying herbs. Your robe's starting to feel like a portable sauna, and you're still reeling from none's endless psalms. The divine office keeps chugging along, but you're noticing something new. A monk older than the hills, his face like crumpled parchment, slipping out of the dormitory with a staff in hand. He's the excitator, the human alarm clock tasked with waking the brothers for prayers, especially vigils, that midnight slog. You're about to meet the guy who makes sure nobody sleeps through God's schedule. The role of the excitator emerged in larger monasteries by the 10th century, when growing communities needed someone to enforce the divine office's relentless timetable. With no mechanical clocks and stars or sundials useless in the dead of night, this monk became a living timekeeper. He'd roam the dormitory tapping beds or whispering sharp surge Latin for "get up to rouse the brothers." It was a job of trust blending astronomy, instinct, and a knack for not getting punched by grumpy monks. That's your mainstream fact. The excitator was a human solution to a cosmic problem, ensuring prayers happened on time, no matter the hour. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some excitators got creative. A 12th century chronicle from a Bavarian abbey mentions one who used a small bell, tinkling it like a mischievous sprite to wake the monks. The novices loved it, but the older brothers complained it sounded like a cat choking. You can imagine Brother Odo grinning as he jingles his bell, while the abbot debates banning it. Historians still argue whether excitators relied on precise stargazing or just a gut feeling for midnight. Did they cross-check with candles, or was experience their only guide? You trail the excitator as he shuffles toward the church, his staff clicking on the stones. He's muttering, probably calculating when to wake everyone for vigils. You're in awe of his stamina. How does he stay awake when you're already dreaming of your straw mattress? His eyes flick to the sky, scanning for stars, and you realize he's carrying the monastery's rhythm in his head. You remember the sundial's fickle shadow, the water clock's leaks. This guy's job makes those look easy. Joke number 1, excitators the worst, gig 0. Sleep, all the glares, and no employee of the month plaque. The courtyard's quiet, save for a monk hauling firewood, his breath puffing in the cooling air. You catch the excitator pausing by a candle niche, checking its burn. He's cross-referencing You Bet Stars candles, maybe even that thrush's song from Lauds. You're starting to see the monastery as a web of timekeeping tricks with this guy as its sleepless spider. You wonder if he ever naps, or if he's secretly powered by divine caffeine. The thought of waking 30 monks in the dark makes you shudder. You'd probably trip over a bed and start a riot. You pass the cloister, the sundial now useless in the fading light. The excitator's staff taps a steady beat, like he's mocking your tired legs. You're half tempted to ask him his secret, but his scowl says he's not here for chit-chat. Joke number 2. If the excitator oversleeps, does the monastery just pray tomorrow? You're learning that time here isn't just tracked, it's guarded fiercely by men like him. Vespers is next, and you're bracing for more chanting, but you can't shake the image of this monk alone in the dark, nudging the monastery, awake one surge at a time. You're lingering in the monastery's courtyard, the evening air cool and heavy, with the scent of wood smoke and fading lavender. Your robe catching a chill that makes you wish for a hoodie. Vespers just wrapped its chants, still echoing in your head like a stubborn Spotify playlist. The sun's gone, leaving a twilight glow, and you hear it, a deep resonant clang from the bell tower rippling across the stones like a command. The monastery's bells are more than noise. They're the heartbeat of the divine office, syncing every monk to the same relentless rhythm. You're about to learn how these peals kept the place from descending into chaos. Bells were the monastery's megaphone by the 10th century, calling monks to prayer work or meals with a sound that could pierce fog or sleep. Each service, prime terce vespers, had its own pattern of rings memorized by every brother. Forged from bronze, often inscribed with Latin prayers, these bells were both practical and sacred, their tolls believed to ward off evil. That's your mainstream fact. Bells were the monastery's central timekeeper, louder than birdsong, more reliable than sundials, uniting the community under one audible schedule. But here's the quirky tidbit: some monks got superstitious about the bells. A 13th century record from a French abbey claims one bell, nicknamed Maria, was thought to ring clearer during Lent, as if fasting made it holier. The novices swore it was true, though the sacristan probably just polished it extra. You can picture Brother Gerard, wide-eyed, whispering about Maria's miracle, while the older monks roll their eyes. Historians still argue whether bell schedules were universal or varied by monastery. Did a Cistercian abbey ring the same pattern as a Benedictine one, or was it a free-for-all? You follow the sound, your sandals scuffing toward the tower. The bell's echo lingers, pulling monks from the scriptorium and fields like a cosmic lasso. You spot the sacristan, his face creased with focus, probably counting peals to signal complain next. You remember the excitator's midnight hustle. The water clock's drips bells tie it all together, a loud, unmissable glue. You're half jealous of the bell ringer's job swinging ropes like a medieval DJ, but one wrong clang could throw off the whole day. Joke number 1. Mess up the bells, and you're not just late, you're excommunicated by dirty looks. The courtyard's alive now, monks converging like ants to a sugar cube, their robes swishing in sync. The bell's power hits you. It's not just timekeeping, it's control. A voice louder than the abbot's. You pass the sundial, useless in the dark, and smirk, thinking of its sunny ego. The bells don't care about clouds or leaks. They just demand obedience. You wonder how the bell ringer keeps track, probably with the sacristan's candle or a star chart. The system's a web, and you're caught in it, one toll at a time. You pause, by the church, the bell's final note fading. A novice trips over a cobble, and you stifle a laugh. He's new, still learning the bell's rhythm. Joke number 2. Bells are the monastery's group chat. Ignore them, and you're left unread by God. Complain's looming, the last prayer before bed, and you're already dreaming of your scratchy mattress. The bells will wake you for vigils, though, and you curse their reliability. You glance at the tower, its silhouette stark against the twilight, and feel the monastery's pulse steady, unyielding, rung out in bronze for all to hear. You're hunched over a wooden table in the monastery's library, the air thick with the musty scent of vellum and the faint tang of candle wax. Your robe sleeves brushing against a manuscript that looks older than sin. It's morning, just after prime, and you're squinting at an illuminated calendar, its pages bursting with tiny saints and swirling vines. Monks didn't just track hours. They wrestled with seasons, feast days, and lunar cycles to keep the liturgical year spinning. These manuscripts were their almanacs, mapping time beyond the daily grind of the divine office, and you're diving into their colorful, cryptic world. By the 11th century, monastic calendars were essential, detailing fixed feasts like Christmas and movable ones like Easter, which hinged on the lunar calendar. Scribes meticulously copied these texts, often in Latin, with red ink marking holy days, hence the phrase Red Letter Day. These calendars weren't just schedules, they were sacred, tying the monastery to cosmic and divine order. That's your mainstream fact. Illuminated manuscripts, especially computist texts for calculating Easter, were monks' seasonal clocks, guiding the year with precision and reverence. But here's the quirky tidbit: some scribes got cheeky with their art. A 12th century manuscript from England includes a doodle of a monk asleep during a feast day, his quill dropped mid-sentence. It's unclear if it was a joke or a subtle jab at Brother Dunstan's napping habits, but it made the abbot's eyebrow twitch. You can imagine the scribe smirking as he inked that sleepy rebel. Historians still argue whether these calendars were purely functional or partly devotional. Did monks treat them as tools or as holy relics in their own right? You trace a finger over the manuscript's gilded letters, the candle beside you flickering like it's bored. The calendar lists St. Cuthbert's feast, and you realize it's tomorrow Q, extra prayers, and probably no dessert. You're starting to see why monks obsessed over these pages. One wrong date, and you're celebrating Easter in July. The sacristan, that timekeeping wizard, probably cross-checks this with the stars just to be safe. You remember the bells clang last night, the water clock's drip. Now this manuscript, another thread in the monastery's timekeeping tapestry. Joke number 1. Miss a feast day, and you're not just late, you're rewriting theology. The library's quiet, save for a monk turning pages with the delicacy of a bomb diffuser. You glance at the calendar's lunar table, its numbers swimming in your tired eyes. Easter's date is a math problem from hell, and you're glad you're not the computista monk stuck solving it. You wonder how they kept sane juggling manuscript sundials and that cranky thrush from Lauds. The manuscript's beauty pulls you in, though its colors glow even in this dim light, like it's daring you to care about time as much as the monks did. You lean back your chair, creaking, and catch a whiff of bread from the refectory. Your stomach growls, but the manuscript's got you hooked. It's not just a calendar, it's a map of devotion. Every date, a step closer to God. Joke number 2. Monks invented bullet journals, but with more guilt and better handwriting. Terce is coming, and you'll be back in the church chanting. You close the manuscript gently, its secret safe for now, and head out, the weight of centuries lingering in your steps. The seasons turn, the feasts approach, and you're just a monk trying to keep up with a year that's as stubborn as the bells. You're perched on a creaky stool in the monastery's chapter house, the morning light slanting through narrow windows, dusting the stone floor with gold. Your robe's starting to smell like a mix of incense and yesterday's soup, and you're clutching a star chart. Its parchment crinkled from years of monkish hands. After terce, the sacristan dragged you here to study the heavens because monks didn't just pray under the stars, they used them to anchor the divine office. You're diving into their astronomical obsession, decoding how constellations guided prayers like cosmic post-it notes. By the 12th century, monasteries were hotbeds of astronomy, with monks studying texts like Bede's De Temporum Ratione to track celestial patterns. They mapped stars to time prayers, especially vigils and lauds when the sky was their only clock. Constellations like Ursa Major or the zodiac signs pegged specific hours, aligning the monastery with God's cosmic order. That's your mainstream fact. Monks were amateur astronomers using star charts to ensure the divine office synced with the heavens from midnight chants to dawn psalms. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some monks saw stars as more than markers. A 13th century chronicle from a Spanish abbey mentions a monk who claimed Orion's belt sang during vigils, a divine hum only the pure could hear. The abbot dismissed it as sleep deprivation, but the novices were obsessed, straining to catch the celestial karaoke. You can picture Brother Sancho, eyes wide, swearing he heard a note. Historians still argue whether monks used precise astronomical calculations or leaned on rough estimates. Did they adjust for seasonal shifts, or did cloudy nights force them to wing it? You squint at the chart, its inked lines tracing Scorpio's curve. The sacristan's droning about how its position signals compline in autumn, but you're half lost, wishing for a telescope, or at least a coffee. You remember the manuscript calendar, its feast days tying the year to the moon. Stars, though, are the monastery's nightly pulse, and you're starting to feel their pull. The sacristan points to a smudged star, saying, "It's your guide for vigils." You nod, but privately, you're betting on the excitator's surge to wake you. Joke number one: star charts, because God's schedule comes with a cosmic PowerPoint. The chapter house is quiet, save for a monk sharpening a quill. It's scraped like a tiny protest. You glance out the window, the sky clear but useless until night. The bells will ring for sext soon, but the stars own the dark, and you're learning to respect their authority. You think of the water clock's leaks, the sundial's tantrums. Stars are steadier if you can read them. You're no bead, though. You're just a monk, fumbling through the heavens, one squinting glance at a time. The sacristan's patience is a miracle, considering your questions sound like a toddler's. You roll up the chart, its parchment crackling, and head for the cloister, the sacristan's lecture trailing you like a stern shadow. The monastery's rhythm feels bigger now. Stars, bells, manuscripts all woven together. You pass a novice tripping over his robe, and you smirk, remembering your own early stumbles. Joke number two: if you misread the stars, do you pray to the wrong constellation? Sext is coming, and you're bracing for more chanting. But the stars linger in your mind, silent guides that outlast your tired bones. You're starting to see why monks looked up. Not you're just for time, but for something eternal, pinning their prayers to the sky. You're slouched in the monastery's refectory, the midday sun streaming through high windows, warming the wooden table where your hands rest, sticky from a lunch of bread and thin vegetable broth. Your robe's got a new stain, thanks broth, and the faint hum of monks murmuring psalms lingers from sext. The divine office rolls on, but you're caught up in a different rhythm now. The heated whispers of a dispute, monks arguing over when to pray, their voices sharp enough to curdle the stew. Timekeeping wasn't just a task here. It could split communities, and you're about to witness the drama. By the 11th century, monasteries faced tension over the precise timing of prayers, especially in diverse regions. The rule of Saint Benedict set general hours, but local conditions, shifting sunrises, cloudy skies, or even abbot's preferences caused variations. Some houses clung to strict star-based schedules. Others leaned on sundials or local customs. These differences sparked debates, occasionally escalating to schisms as monks accused rivals of dishonoring God with sloppy timing. That's your mainstream fact. Disputes over prayer times were real. sometimes leading to rival factions within or between monasteries, all fighting to claim divine accuracy. But here's the quirky tidbit. One English abbey around 1150 reportedly split over whether to start lauds at the first rooster's crow or the second. A chronicle claims the second crow faction mocked their rivals as hen worshippers, and the abbot had to ban poultry puns during Vespers. You can picture Brother Ethelred smirking as he whispers cock-a-doodle-doo mid-chant. Historians still argue whether these disputes were about theology or just petty power grabs. Did monks genuinely care about precision? Or were they flexing egos under the guise of piety? You lean back at the bench, creaking, and catch a monk glaring at another across the table, probably still salty about last week's vigil's timing. The sacristan, poor guy, looks like he's aged a decade, stuck mediating between the star chart purists and the sundial fanboys. You remember the bell's unifying clang, the manuscript's orderly feasts, yet even those couldn't stop monks from bickering over minutes. You're half tempted to suggest they all chill, but one wrong word and you're scrubbing pots till Easter. Joke number one: time disputes, because nothing says holy like arguing over a rooster's alarm clock. The refectory's buzz fades as monks clear plates, their sandals shuffling like a tired drumbeat. You spot the excitator, his staff propped nearby, probably dreading tonight's wake-up rounds. He's got to navigate this mess, rousing monks who might mutter about wrong stars as they stumble to vigils. You're starting to see the monastery as a pressure cooker, every drip shadow and toll a potential spark for drama. The sacristan rises, signaling nuns' approach, and you brace for more chanting, wondering if the second crow guy will start trouble again. You grab a crust of bread, sneaking a bite as you head to the cloister. The air's warmer now, carrying the scent of cut grass from the fields. The disputes linger in your mind, a reminder that time wasn't just kept. It was fought over, passionately, like a medieval Reddit thread. Joke number two: if monks had Twitter, they'd ratio each other over sundial accuracy. You pass the sundial, its shadow crisp, but useless in the face of human stubbornness. Nuns coming, and you're caught in the monastery's rhythm disputes, and all wondering how faith and ego got so tangled in something as simple as time. You're trudging through the monastery's orchard, the late afternoon sun filtering through gnarled apple trees, their leaves rustling with a breeze that smells of earth and overripe fruit. Your robe snags on a branch, and you're still chewing on the refectory's drama, monks squabbling over roosters and stars like it's a theological cage match. None just ended its psalms fading into the hum of bees, but there's a new buzz in the air, whispers of something foreign, clunky and loud. A mechanical clock, an invention creeping into Europe's fringes, threatening the monastery's ancient ways. You're about to feel the first tremors of change. By the late 13th century, early mechanical clocks were appearing in wealthy towns and cathedrals, driven by weights and gears, ticking out hours with eerie precision. Unlike sundials or water clocks, these didn't rely on nature, just human ingenuity. Monasteries, though, were slow to adopt them. Their timekeeping was sacred, tied to stars' bells and God's rhythm. Still, rumors of these devices reached even rural abbeys, stirring curiosity and suspicion. That's your mainstream fact. Mechanical clocks were emerging in Europe, challenging monastic traditions with their relentless artificial beat. But here's the quirky tidbit. One Italian monastery around 1280 reportedly received a prototype clock as a gift from a merchant only for the monks to dismantle it, fearing its unnatural ticking was demonic. The sacristan legend says sprinkled holy water on the gears before they were buried. You can picture Brother Paolo, wide-eyed, muttering about Satan's metronome while the abbot sighs. Historians still argue whether monks rejected clocks out of faith or just distrust of new tech. Were they guarding tradition or just bad at change management? You pause by a tree, plucking a wormy apple and tossing it aside. The orchard's quiet, but you imagine a clock's tick echoing here alien and sharp against the bell's familiar clang. You remember the excitator's staff, the sundial's shadow tools you've grudgingly come to trust. A machine that counts hours without stars or wax feels like cheating, maybe even a little blasphemous. You spot the sacristan near the cloister, his face creased as he chats with a monk who's heard of these tower clocks in Milan. You're betting he's not a fan. Joke number one: mechanical clocks, because who needs God when gears can judge your tardiness? The monastery feels like it's holding its breath, caught between the old ways and a future you can't quite grasp. You pass a novice hauling a basket of apples, his grunt reminding you of the monastery's grounded rhythm work: pray, eat, repeat. But the idea of a clock lingers, its promise of precision, tempting its strangeness unnerving. You wonder if the sacristan's already plotting to stick with his star charts and candles. The bells toll for vespers, their peals drowning out your thoughts, and you're grateful for their certainty, their defiance of whatever's coming. You head toward the church, the grass soft under your sandals, the orchard's scent clinging to you. The mechanical clock's shadow looms not here yet, but close like a storm you can't see but feel. You think of the water clock's leaks, the manuscript's gilded feasts, relics of a system that's worked for centuries. Joke number two: if a clock ticks in the monastery, does the abbot make it pray for forgiveness? Vespers calls, and you're swept back into the divine office, but the world's turning faster now, and you're not sure the monastery can keep pace. You're slumped against a stone wall in the monastery's cloister. The evening air cool and laced with the faint sweetness of crushed grass. Your robe now a patchwork of dust and apple juice from that orchard stumble. Vespers chants still hum in your ears, but the talk of mechanical clocks has left a restless edge, like a song you can't unhear. The monks around you are doubling down, clinging to their stars, bells, and candles with a stubbornness that feels both noble and doomed. You're caught in their resistance, feeling the weight of tradition as it braces against the ticking future. Monastic resistance to mechanical clocks wasn't just about faith, it was practical. By the late 13th century, clocks were expensive, clunky, and needed constant tweaking. Hardly a match for the monastery's battle-tested system of natural cues and human grit. Monks saw their timekeeping as a sacred act, woven into the divine office's rhythm, not something to outsource to gears. Adopting a clock meant rethinking centuries of discipline, and most abbeys weren't ready to trade their star charts for a machine's cold precision. That's your mainstream fact. Monks resisted mechanical clocks to preserve their spiritual and communal order, not just because they hated change. But here's the quirky tidbit: some monks took resistance to absurd lengths. A 14th century account from a German abbey claims a monk hid the monastery's sundial under a pile of hay, hoping to protect God's time from rumors of a nearby town's clock. The sacristan found it, and the culprit spent a month peeling onions as penance. You can picture Brother Hildebert muttering about heathen machines while sneaking straw into the cloister. Historians still argue whether this resistance was purely religious or partly fear of losing control. Did monks dread clocks as tools of secular power? Or were they just loyal to their leaky water clocks? You shift the stone, cold, against your back and watch the sacristan pace nearby, his face a map of worry. He's probably thinking of the excitator's midnight rounds, the bell's steady toll systems he trusts, unlike some fancy Milanese clock. You remember the manuscript's feast days, the star chart's inked Scorpio. They're not just tools, but pieces of the monastery's soul. You're starting to get why the monks are digging in. A clock's tick might be precise, but it's soulless, lacking the warmth of a thrush's song, or the bell's holy clang. Joke number 1. Monks versus clocks. Spoiler: the monks brought candles to a gear fight. The cloister's quiet, save for a novice sweeping his broom, whispering against the stones. Complene's near, and you're dreading another round of kneeling. But the monastery's defiance gives you a strange pride. You pass the sundial, its shadow gone in the dusk, and smirk, Hildebert would approve. The sacristan's muttering, now probably cursing the merchant who mentioned clocks at last week's market. You're betting he'd rather wrestle a leaky water clock than a gear-driven monster. The bells ring, pulling you toward the church, their sound a middle finger to the future. You shuffle forward, the air growing colder, the monastery's rhythm wrapping around you like a familiar blanket. The resistance feels personal. Now you're not just a monk. You're a guardian of something ancient, fragile, and fiercely alive. Joke number 2. If a clock ticks in the cloister, the monks will exercise it before breakfast. Compline's waiting, and you're ready to chant to hold the line with the brothers, one prayer at a time. The world's changing, but here in this stubborn, starlit bubble, you're betting on tradition to outlast the gears for now. You're standing in the monastery's church, the air heavy with the scent of melted wax and old stone, your robe sagging under the weight of a long day's dust and defiance. Compline's just ended its final psalm, fading into a hush that feels like the world holding its breath. The candles flicker, casting shadows that dance across the walls, and you're alone now, the other monks shuffling off to their straw mattresses. You're not just wrapping up a day. You're reflecting on how these monks, with their stars, bells, and stubborn hearts, shape the way we chase time today. Their legacy lingers, and you're about to trace its quiet, lasting echo. The monks' timekeeping wasn't just survival. It laid the groundwork for our modern hours. By the 14th century, their obsession with precise prayer schedules, honed through sundials, candles, and star charts, fed into the development of mechanical clocks. Monasteries, despite their resistance, standardized time in ways that spilled into towns and cities, giving us the structured day we now take for granted. That's your mainstream fact. Monastic timekeeping, with its relentless rhythm, was a blueprint for the 24-hour clock, bridging sacred discipline to secular life. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some monks accidentally helped clocks spread. A 13th century Benedictine sent to repair a cathedral's water clock sketched its gears so well that a nearby town built a mechanical one based on his notes. He was horrified, but his doodles outlived his protests. You can picture Brother Martin muttering about my cursed quill, while the town's clock ticked smugly. Historians still argue whether monks were time's pioneers or its reluctant midwives. Did they drive progress, or did their tools just get hijacked by a clock-hungry world? You step toward a candle niche, its flame wobbling like it's whispering secrets. The monastery's rhythm bell stars. That cranky thrush feels alive in your bones. You remember the excitators surge, the water clock's drip, the disputes over roosters. These weren't just quirks. They were a system flawed but fierce that carried the monks through centuries. You're starting to see your own life in their struggle, chasing deadlines, juggling schedules, cursing when tech fails. Joke number 1. Monks invented multitasking, just with more psalms and fewer spreadsheets. The church is silent now, the air cooler as night settles. You glance at the rose window. It's glass dark, but still glowing faintly, like it's holding on to the day. The monk's legacy isn't just clocks. It's the idea that time matters, that it's worth fighting for. Whether with a sundial or a smartphone, you're tired, your knees aching from too much kneeling, but you feel a strange gratitude for these brothers, their stubborn, starlit hustle. Joke number 2. If monks had TikTok, they'd go viral for timekeeping hacks and epic bell solos. You turn